All right, we're going to restart the program. We had a fabulous session on how to start and kind of build and be an operator of starting a new company. Now, one of the biggest challenges and kind of a black hole, really, is funding the company. How do you even do that? Who do you talk to? Who are the best people? There's some good investors, some bad investors, all kinds of great stories, horror stories that we're about to hear. So really excited to introduce Jim Self and his panel.
It's really awesome to get applause like that. Especially when you've done nothing. So I have a prize for the first person that was sitting in the first row, but there's nobody there. So then we go to the second row and there's nobody there. So we go to the third row. We go to the third row and we have a prize for each of the guys that are sitting up close. Too late, bro. And you guys don't count. So there's a lesson there. Always go to the front of the line. My name's Jim Self. I was at Clemson from 83 to 88. When I came out of college, I started at Merck, started in manufacturing. And one of the things that you're going to learn when you get into this is that inside companies, they will gladly silo you, right? If you start in manufacturing, guess what? The job that you want, the guy's going to say, okay, I want to hire somebody for this. And they want somebody's resume that looks just like theirs. And so you end up getting siloed. I was very lucky in that I did not get siloed. I started in manufactured with quality control and then did the whole MBA thing and got into corporate development, business development, did a bunch of deals, and then was at Merck for 22 years and then pivoted into consulting. And what I do now is just help companies get deals done, right? Which we're going to talk a little bit about here. Woody kind of set us up really good from the very beginning. And that's the fact that only 30% of Big Pharma's pipeline is internally generated. So that means 70% or so of all the drugs that are approved are coming out of small companies, startup companies, and they're coming from entrepreneurs, right? Now, why is that? What do you think? I can tell you why. Turns out that Big Pharma is really, really good at drug development, right? Development. Navigating the FDA, market access, all of those things, they're very good at that. And they're also really, really good at sales, marketing, commercialization, got the global reach. It's fantastic. They're good at that. But when you get inside a company like an AbbVie or a Merck or a Pfizer, innovation, creativity, taking risks, not so much. That's not their forte. So what we're going to talk about today is what I call the Bermuda Triangle of biotech, right? The real Bermuda Triangle, as I'm sure you guys know, is Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. And it's infamous for these mysterious plane crashes, sunken ships, disappearances. That's not as true today because all the modern navigation, all the modern equipment, et cetera. But you can rest assured, like back in the day, if you're going to be traveling anywhere that near the Bermuda Triangle, your number one thing is to manage and navigate those risks. That's the challenge that we have in biotech and pharma and life sciences. Listen to this. Pharma needs new drugs to fill the pipeline. That's a fact. And by the way, we have these things, we didn't even discuss them, called patent cliffs, where you go from $1 billion a year to $20 million a year. So those big numbers that a drug puts up, they don't last forever because of the patents. So pharma needs the new drugs to fill the pipeline. Guess what? Entrepreneurs are there. They're ready. They can provide the new drugs. But guess what? They need money. Well, lucky for us, investors have a lot of money, and they can supply the money. but investors need returns. That's okay, because pharma is really willing to stroke huge checks, right, Chris? 1.3 billion? There you go. That's a big, big check. They're happy to write big checks, but we have to be pretty much assured that there's no risk in the project, right? They don't want to pay for any risk, and that's where the challenge comes. The big money, the deal that all the entrepreneurs and everybody's looking for, that's a home run for the entrepreneurs. It's a home run for the investors, and it's a home run, most importantly, for the patients, right? The great thing about this industry is that we have an opportunity to do well and do good all at the same time. And I think that's the biggest thing here that, I mean, we've heard it in a bunch of different ways. Every single one of us in this room is a patient, and innovation is driving our society forward. So this fancy picture, this is what I call the Bermuda Triangle of biotech. In biotech, we don't actually just deal with risk. We jump in and swim with it. Every stage from bench to bedside, risk is ever present. So today what we're going to talk about is just 3 angles that I'd like us to explore. The money, which is coming from investors. The business. I mean, we've hardly touched on just all of the operational risk and the scientific risk that you have to go through to get a company up and running. And then we're going to talk about the deal. Everybody likes to talk about the deal because that's the exit. And when you stand up here and you say, we only got 1.3 billion, pity for you. But first, let's get to the stars of this. So I want to introduce our panelists, Chris Harte, Amanda Clark, and Jonathan Foster. So if you guys each take a moment, tell everybody what you do, what your company does, et cetera. But not too much, et cetera, because we got to move.
I'm going to be quick. I'm John Foster. I'm graduated from Clemson in '85 in accounting, CPA. So I wandered into life sciences 15 years ago, and the public company route. I've been associated with 6 public companies. I'm on the board of 2 right now, and EVP and CFO of Molecular and Biotech. We're developing a next generation anthracycline that's non-cardiotoxic, that addresses about 60% of all cancers, and we're in a phase 3.
What does that mean when you say not toxic? Tell them what it means.
Well, you told me to keep it short. So.
Yeah, keep it short, but tell them what it means.
So
Cliff note.
Anthracyclines was created 50 years ago. Basically, a topo 2 poison basically poisons the DNA. So it's very, very toxic, not only to cancer cells, but healthy cells. Also, the cancer cells develop a resistance called multi-drug resistance to traditional anthracycline. So eventually it starts pumping it out. So typically you're limited to about 2 cycles before 1, the drug stops working, and 2, before it starts injuring your heart. At about 2 cycles, you have about a 15% chance of long-term cardiac damage. Once you get to what we dosed, which was about 6 times, we've been up to 6 times lifetime maximum, with 0 cardiotoxicity, both short-term and long-term. Also, we've shown that we avoid multi-drug resistance. So hence the term next generation anthracycline.
Awesome. Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda Clark. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called PulManage. We're based in Columbia, South Carolina. We're a digital health company, and my background is caregiver, clinician, turned entrepreneur. I left the bedside about 12 years ago, and PulManage is the 3rd startup, so it truly is a disease. I will say that your statement about falling in love with the problem, I fell in love with the problem as a teenager. It affected my personal family, and so I've seen the journey that thousands of patients have been on. So PulManage is a digital platform to connect researchers with patients in their home. Basically, we deploy devices into the patient's home to collect endpoints that are required for regulatory approval.
Chris Harte, class clown. I gave my intro, so.
Good job. Well, I think before, we actually ought to say we got a repo man, a barrel racer, and a rock star up on stage.
More like knuckle dragger.
I did not say that. So
Way back.
for you guys, like, where are you currently? You can't see that beautiful picture behind you that kind of in retrospect now looks like a little bit of a toilet bowl. But where are you currently in the journey through the Bermuda Triangle?
Great, make the girl go first. Okay, so I can't see that, but I will tell you I'm the entrepreneur sitting in the middle of the vertex. And if you live in startup world, which is where I'm at, raising a seed fund, you're literally always on the edge of the cliff.
So we're right there on the edge. We're in a phase 3. We're a phase 3 asset. We just closed a Series F financing. So just to show you, from even in the public world, you'll have multiple levels of financing. Being a phase 3 asset, we are, in partnership discussions, but partnership discussions can take up to a year of due diligence. We're a small biotech, so our phase 2 had a small sample size. We only had an N of 22, but off the charts data. But big pharma, they are risk averse. As Jim already alluded to, talking about de-risking, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're looking at innovative ways to de-risk our phase 3.
So looking at the triangle, we sold to a strategic partner, and that's how we did our exit. And we're medical device, so we 510(k) approved, and yeah. The most complex part was actually, I think, somewhere you have regulatory and payers. Payers, that is the thing we grossly underestimated going into this. But one thing I can add on the journey here is that a little bit differently, Jim, we always operated the company like we were going to go public. So we never operated the company that we were just going to flip it, right? And so we built this very robust company. And when the strategic partner came along, and said, hey, we're interested in buying you, we said, no. And they said, we'll offer you $1.3 billion. And I was like, I think yes. But seriously, we're still operating the company rather independently in there. And that was some of our terms and conditions, because we had this unwarranted hubris that we knew what we were doing. But I think that's important. I think there are two models, Jim, maybe you can talk to, or somebody can talk to it. There's just building it up and trying to sell it off. There's also just building a robust company that actually is a standalone that you can, either A, sell off, or B, just go public, which is another exit.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too, because startup companies, depending on the markets that you're in, the path to commercialization, you may or may not have the means, right? If you are doing a primary care product that's going into 90,000 offices or more than that across the United States, you got to build out sales forces, you've got infrastructure, marketing, you got a ton of stuff to build out that it's not really keen for you to do. If you're in certain markets, I mean, potentially even like, some of the folks I think have spoken about the orphan drug market. Beautiful thing about orphan drugs, right? Very identifiable patient population, very small sector. When people come and start offering you money, it's actually a really good tactic, by the way, when you're doing a deal. I don't want your money. Well, here's 1.3 billion. Okay, we'll take your money, right? It depends on the therapeutic area you are and the commercialization path. The other thing too is, the bigger companies have global reach. So how do you get that global reach? Plus the other thing that we did not talk about is, phase 1 capital, phase 2 capital, phase 3 capital. I loved, we were talking about your chart and those numbers. I think anybody would have signed up for those development numbers on that chart. But how about you, Amanda? Because you're commercializing your own products as well.
So I think we're on a little bit different path. And so one of the previous discussions from the innovator founder segment kind of resonates with me. So I started this journey, my first company, all the way back to the very first single shingle LLC that I had, was really to understand how and why we have a misdiagnosis problem, why patients are losing quality of life and lung function, and no one's really doing anything about it. Respiratory disease is not fun or sexy. People don't fall over dead immediately from it. They is very long and progressive, typically falls into a chronic disease state. And what most people don't know about respiratory disease is that outside of like asthma and COPD that you hear about on the, on the TV and all of the big pharma commercials, is that the majority of respiratory disease actually falls in the rare disease space. And so a lot of times these patients really fall into silos. They are very isolated, but their struggle is very real. So back to kind of, I guess, where we are, the regulatory path. So we started down this whole path to healthcare. And my background is healthcare. I was a respiratory therapist and at the management level, worked in the primary care office, understand all the fun things about insurance, and it's not so fun. And value-based care is not so value-based always. And so that was really the path that that our company started on. And I had an investor come to me and said, show me your traction. So I was like, I flipped back in my deck and I was like, here's my traction. And he said, no, show me your traction that matches your go-to-market. And I was like, well, what do you mean? So it was a pretty hard gut check for us. That discussion put us on a journey to understanding how we can serve academic and biopharma researchers. We have a tool and a platform that's very, very needed. 9 out of 10 patients that are 9 out of 10 respiratory therapeutic studies that require lung function testing require patients to go directly into a clinical trial site. And so if you can imagine that most of these patients are rare disease, that then presents a ton of logistical barriers to being able to participate in clinical trials. And for the large biopharma companies, that then changes the cost and the trajectory of their medications being actually going through approval and kind of passing the bar. And so with all of that, I say that when we made that hard pivot about 9-10 months ago, we had to change our regulatory strategy. So instead of being really commercial focused, 510K specific, we still have some of those goals, but we understand that our product is multifaceted and that our platform has multiple products within it. And so our regulatory strategy is a little more complex. And I think that probably is due to some of the customers that we're going to be serving. So we'll start out as a phase 1 or a class 1 medical device, software as a medical device, and then bring other pieces on as we complete some of our feasibility and our machine learning.
So let's talk about, getting started, right? An idea is great, but to actually put it to practice, you need the money. These guys have some money to invest, by the way. What about your approach in raising funds? It's going to be a little bit different, particularly, I think a couple of you, one of you a shoestring, one of you maybe started off with family, friends, and fools. One of you's publicly traded. So talk about, why did an investor invest in you and why did they not invest?
So Molecular went public in 2016. Prior to that, it had bootstrapped itself with the friends and family and fools, but wouldn't call them fools. But in 2016, we did IPO it. The science was jointly developed with MD Anderson Cancer Center out of Houston. So it's a older molecule, but we improved the formulation. So for someone to be in a phase 3, we're very unique that we have patent life to 2040, which is very unusual for somebody in a phase 3 that they have that long of a patent life. So teaming up with MD Anderson, and the reason we went public is the CEO I'd worked with in a prior life. And we had some angel investors that were willing to be the initial seed money to get us to the public. And so it was a very unique opportunity. And since then, as I mentioned, we're on Series F from a standpoint of raises. Right now, mainly we're with hedge funds. So they're very transactional based, volume based, news based. And now with this phase 3 data, we're looking to get into the fundamental funds. That'd be our next stage.
A very important part of our foundation is slightly different. We probably had friends, family, and fools, but the government of Iceland actually has an innovation funding program. And they gave us a loan of $500,000 to do our RCT, randomized control trial, to get the 510K. which is a shoestring budget still. So trust me, we did that one on the, yeah, I know. So, and we also solved some of the doctors who, the PI and so forth, we gave them options and so forth. So there was a lot of dilution in trying to get the thing off the ground, from our ownership. But, with a combination of options and a grant, and then the second big thing that happened, because Jim had funding somewhere up here, we got a $3 million grant from the DoD to do another very large burn trial. And, so the first one's in Iceland, and then Americans go, yeah, that's interesting, but that was in Iceland. It's like, well, they are Homo sapiens sapiens, but okay. I get it. They're not American. NATO country, though. So that helped us get on the ground. So we got $3 million. I couldn't believe it. Well, I did the damn application myself. Remember, I don't know anything, but you have to be a subject matter expert. So just learn everything you can and get really good at it. And when we got that $3 million and we did that trial, that really took off, and that gave us legitimacy in the U.S. And then actually our first sales were to the VA, Veterans Affairs, because we had a DoD project that legitimized our product, and then that was good enough there. And then we started to become self-funding soon after that.
Yeah, well, my funding journey is a little bit different. I've started with some grants actually from the SCRA folks here in South Carolina, but I bootstrapped, and I think I mentioned I had a couple of other ventures, so I self-funded. Brought on a couple of different technical founders, so brought a little bit of capital, a lot of sweat equity came with that, and we've been really just slowly rolling, talking to family offices, angels, investors, trying to understand where our position is, how much do we need to raise. I will tell you that it's been really a huge mindset shift from my other two ventures and how we access capital. One thing that I will say, there's a big press, and not necessarily just from the university, or this university, but just in general, is to really press after venture capital. And I will say that venture capital is part of our equation for this corporation. However, there are other options to fund that you may not have to go and seek outside formal money for. The other thing I'd like to kind of add to that is that I'm the only woman on this panel, and that fundraising for women, I don't know what it's like as a man, but fundraising for me has not been fun. Only 2%, here's some fun stats, only 2% of venture capital is actually invested in women founders, 2%. And actually in the last 2 years, that number has decreased. So if you look at folks like, what's his name, the dream guy, the bald guy from Kevin Leary, it's Mr. Wonderful, that's his name. He loves women founders because I don't know about the rest of you women, but I run my household like a tight ship, and I can make a penny scream. And I run my company the same way. And so there's a lot of opportunity for return on investment, actually a higher return on investment, but getting those initial dollars in has been incredibly challenging. And so, I was having a conversation with Lindsay last night. She's also a female founder. We learned to be pretty scrappy, and you can do a lot with a little. You can be really creative with your cap table and your stock options and offering sweat equity. There are ways outside of having to go and get organized money. So I will say that I think that after you get your first round in and you prove some initial successes, that the next round I anticipate to be much easier.
You think about the money. I mean, every investor up there has a different risk profile, right, that they're operating off of. You've got the uncle who gives you, $5,000, and he keeps asking you every single week, how much, when's my return? When is it coming? The VCs obviously are financial. Jonathan spoke about, his investors now are transactional. People invest for a bunch of different reasons, and they all have, different risk profiles. So how did you, in convincing somebody to give you money, how were you able to kind of de-risk the company in order to get them to buy in? And I will say this, that the new idea, the whiz bang thing, is fantastic, right? But that's not what investors invest in, right? They invest in people. And so how did you de-risk the company so that somebody's willing to give you money?
Okay, I'll try to keep this short. This will be difficult, but you will, I know, keep me in line. I would say first
Have
of
a
all,
buzzer over here.
first of all, a great team. What Jennifer said earlier. If you have somebody if you're in a toxic environment, or if you have somebody toxic, get rid of them. We have 17 employees that are running. We have 3 assets. We were running 3 trials at one time, just 17 people. You would see Merck or Pfizer with 60 to 100 people. So first of all, build a fantastic team. Second of all, you really have to look at your asset and really focus on what is the best, fastest path to approval. As I mentioned, our lead drug is Annamycin. The generic name is next to Rubicin. So it's a Rubicin, like all typical anthracyclines. It's addressable to 60% of the market. However, we focused on AML, and one of the reasons I went to work with the company, my father passed away from AML, and when a good friend called me and said, "Hey, you want to join this company?" You know, what a great story. I couldn't write it any better. So AML is acute myeloid leukemia, cancer of the blood, starts in the bone marrow. So we focused on it. It does have orphan drug designation, so it is a rare disease. We're also targeting soft tissue sarcoma, which is also a rare disease. So we started in that segment, which right now big pharma is very much focused on. Second of all, the FDA has what's called Project Optimus for oncology drugs. The FDA at the end of 2023 was tired of oncology companies going to the maximum tolerable dose for cancer drugs. They really wanted to see more evidence of companies going for the maximum efficacious dose, not the tolerable dose. So when we went to meet with the FDA for our end of phase 2 meeting, they wanted us to do more work. We thought we had done enough. And so in our phase 3, it's actually a phase 2b3. We have 2 different arms of this Annamycin plus cytarabine at 2 different doses compared to cytarabine. And they said, we want to see a readout after 90 patients. Went to the financial markets and said, hey, this is how much money I need to get to 90 patients. The bankers said, you'll never get there. So yeah, that's a big ouch moment when you're in a strategy meeting with the 17 employees. But again, look at it from a strategy. If the FDA wants you to do an unblinding at 90 patients, why not do an unblinding at 45 patients? Go back to the bankers. Hey, this is how much money I need to get to unblinding of 45 patients. And they said, yeah, we think you can do that. So literally this time last year, we were meeting with the FDA in our end of phase 2 meeting, and we expect to recruit the 45th patient in October. How did we get there? Continuing the de-risking, we have gone to the ends of this earth to recruit. We're all the way in Lithuania. We're actually we believe the only company in Kyiv, Ukraine, running a trial. Our CEO and our chief medical officer have spent time in bomb shelters. So again, look at every single aspect, not the clinical trial, the data, to the financing to de-risk it.
De-risking is a little bit different for me. Understanding what the feasibility and going through some of the early compliance, SOC 2 compliance, we're almost finished with that. We've got some feasibility data that we'll be submitting to FDA. We've had a pre-sub meeting with them. And so 2026 will look very different for us. But I think de-risking really in the early days, it's about taking a bet, one, on the problem. The problem's big enough and it warrants that kind of investment because the return could be there. 2, it's about the founding team and who's on your team. So on my team, I have over 60 plus years in pulmonary critical care medicine and 40 plus in cloud-based architecture design. And so I think that's part of just understanding and telling the story to the investor. They need to know that you're the right people to solve the right problem, and that you have the tools and the vision to get there. And then you also have to tell them kind of what am I going to do with your money, and what are my inflection points. And I think as a founder, one thing that's just a good business practice for anyone in this room is to deliver early and under budget. And to be able to do that is very, very key to showing that one, you validate your team and your problem and all the things that you're doing, and you set yourself up for success for the next raise.
So over promise and under promise and over deliver. No, I did. Chris, I want to pivot with you a little bit, right? So when I think about being the CEO, any of you guys ever watch a basketball game? I have this vision of the lady on the unicycle. You know, she's up on that unicycle. She's got this thing, and she's stacking dishes on top of her head while 20,000 people are screaming and looking at her. How do you manage running a company, advancing the science, keeping the current investors happy, attracting the new investors, and seeking that one perfect strategic partner? That's a simple question. So if you could just answer it quickly, it'd be great.
Luck. No, it's actually important. It's an important point. And again, what we chose very, very consciously early on when we did our A, B, and C, I'm being flippant. Oh, we got some grants and everything was fine. But of course, we did an A, B, and C funding, and we turned away a lot of investors. Woody said early on that you have to find people who are aligned with your mission. It's funny, even when I say this stuff, I feel like you students are probably like, yeah, sounds easy. But trust me, when you're up here in 30 years, you're going to be going, that's what they were talking about. Yeah. Now I understand. But the important de-risking and balancing is we started commercialization in a limited way, right? As we were trying to raise money. So we were constantly proving the concept. Okay, we would get our price points. We would get our reimbursement. Then we go back for more. Otherwise, the investors, if you just have a technology and you're just trying to license it or just get more money to do something with it or play with the shiny object, like Woody was saying, you're going to get highly, highly discounted and highly, highly diluted. So you don't even have to sell much. You just have to prove it. And then you get those doctors, in our case, as key opinion leaders, right? They'll come back and they'll talk to the investors. Well, actually, I used it and I saved this person's leg, or this person had a 90% TBSI, total burn surface area, and was probably going to die, and we used the product and that person lived. And suddenly the investor's like, oh, okay, great, And so by constantly operating and improving while we were raising money, I think was for us the right strategy. And by the way, for the ultimate exit, so they bought the company, not just the technology. We weren't just selling the technology. We had a whole operating unit that they could just plug in.
So I want to add to that. When people ask me just randomly that not always in a professional circle, what do you do for a living? Like, well, I make lemonade and I herd cats. And I think that's truly what it feels like to be a startup founder. You wear every hat in the building, and to be on a startup team, and I have a team of 4 plus, fixing to be plus 2 more, so 6. We're lean and mean, but I expect you to do everything. If it needs to be done, you see it needs to be done, just take care of it, please. Just like I do with my teenage boys. If you see something that needs to be done, please take out the trash. And I pay your car insurance. And so just the same thing carries over, I think, in the culture in the company. And for you students, you may start out in a lower level position when you come out of college, but I think integrity is huge. And so be willing to step up and shine.
Jonathan, I'm going to pivot with you too. This is how you get a lot of questions in. You pivot a lot. So you're out now. You've done your financing. You're going into your pivotal trials. So now you're at a point of, okay, we need to go find a partner, right? And you're kind of starting that journey now. What surprised you most about that process?
Well, I would say us being what I've told you, a next generation anthracycline is getting everybody else to believe that you're a next generation anthracycline. We're not a Me Too drug. Anthracyclines have been around for 50 years. So now we're trying to convince people that we've changed something that's been around for 50 years. We started with doctors, key opinion leaders. That's where you have to start. That is who big pharma eventually goes back to and asks their opinion. 2 years ago, when we were meeting with key opinion leaders, they were going, targeted therapies, where their complete remission rate's about 20% in second line. We're at 50% in our last trial. And now, a year later, those key opinion leaders, they're believers. They've bought into the story, and hence we're recruiting very fast in our phase 3. And now we're just waiting for big pharma to listen to those key opinion leaders.
And are you technically a 505(b)(2)? A 505(b)(2)?
Yes.
All right. What's going on with your managed care and access? I mean, are you going to be able, because that's a big challenge when you launch, a 505(b)(2), they look at it as a new formulation of an old drug or whatever.
We're at NCE.
Okay.
So we're in NCE.
Perfect.
And so from that standpoint, the next few years, we have a lot of money to spend on CMC and non-clinical work.
What surprised you looking for a strategic partner? You're just getting started, right?
Well, if you call begging not starting, we've been begging for years. So we do have a head of biz dev. So you want to find somebody that is in the biz dev world, go into bios, the bios Europe, the bios US, South Carolina has its own bio. I would say from that standpoint, that's a different world, but they live by edicts. They've been giving edicts by the C-suite what to go look for. We're also now looking for pathways to the C-suite, to the chief medical officers, to get them excited so they change the edicts they're giving the biz dev people.
Yes, please.
So one of the things that surprised me, again, I sound flippant, but is how ridiculously stupid some of these investors are. I mean, they don't have a freaking clue. And so we would talk to a lot of them. They would ask you questions, and you go in there eagerly. You're trying to get money, and you realize that these guys don't get it. Like, they really don't get it. And it was really hard to find partners who really understand what we're doing and to appreciate it. So, be cautious. So, when you're looking for investors, if you're sitting there looking like this guy doesn't get it, just cut him, man.
In the spirit of the John Hannon, shameless plug, I happen to know somebody who's pretty good at getting into those suites and doing deals. So if anybody is looking to get deals done, I know a guy. Tell me I wouldn't have loved to have the fees from 1.3 billion. That'd be awesome. Look, was there ever a time, yes or no question, ever a time you just wanted to quit and walk away from this?
So I was going to say that yes, networking is perfect. For us as a startup, we had the opportunity to participate in a international digital health accelerator based out of Boston. And that accelerator made a lot of connections for us. We connected with 7 large international biopharma firms, have ongoing conversations. They introduced us to the key folks in those firms. We understand, just like you're selling a product to anyone else, you need to understand, do they have a problem that I can solve? And the answer is yes, because we can remove 40% of variability from their lung function data, which is huge, and the patient doesn't have to go into a clinical trial site. So to answer your next question, absolutely every day, sometimes many times a day.
In a day.
Saying, what am I doing? But I also remember what it was like when I was institutionalized and I worked in the healthcare system. I become so incredibly frustrated with the patient's journey and the fight with the administration over staffing and the cost of every widget, and to your point, just really trying to beat all of that down is incredibly exhausting. And so when I think about having to go back to that, I find a new breath of energy and continue forward.
The question is if we ever wanted
To quit.
to quit.
Put your hands up and walk away.
I've worked for some big companies, Deloitte, Schlumberger. I never want to go back into that world. I love small companies. I was the first public company I was with that had 2,000 employees worldwide. I never want to go back in that environment. So right now, I would say no. But Wally Klemp, our CEO, and we kind of have a saying on bad days that you don't worry about risk, you worry about the solution. And our saying is, if we see one going down the dark path, we'll remind them, don't worry about putting on your parachute until you're out of the plane.
Do you ever want to quit?
No. First of all, I was probably utterly unemployable anywhere else, so just had to keep my job. But in all seriousness, we were just maybe naively just overconfident that what we had was gonna work. And I don't know, man. You know, as an entrepreneur, you just have to have this almost overconfidence. There's a great saying I learned from a captain, a sea captain, but there are different versions of it. It's like, I'm not always right, but I'm always sure, you know?
Yep.
And we just had that confidence of just, we're doing the right thing. And when we get hit in the head, we would just shake it off and keep moving forward. And there are many times we could have given up, but you just can't, man. You know, you just got to keep going if you think you're right.
So I think the takeaway here, all you Clemson students that are sitting there thinking about, I want to get a job. If you really want to get a job, be unemployable and jump into the entrepreneurship space. We got a few moments for questions. So I want to get some questions out here.
One thing that especially on this last round, so if somebody is a founder, they're a baby entrepreneur, there was a lot of stuff that you just talked about, Series A, B, C, D, E, F, 505(b), which I don't know if the students even know what that is. And so as someone getting into the entrepreneur chain, where do you go how do you know what you don't know? Or where do you go to find what you don't know? I imagine the networking is the answer, but.
No, you sort of answered your own question. So mentorship. So I would say, again, for the students here, one of the best qualities that I think I have is I do have massive ego to succeed. I do. I really do. But I have no ego about how to get there. Like, I'll take input from anybody. Yeah. And I'll ask mentors and I mean, I have a lot of mentors. I mean, okay, I'm 56. They're probably dying off now, but anyway, but I would just call and ask these people, and they'll tell you all this stuff. I mean, talk to these guys here. If I'm your students, get all their numbers and get them on LinkedIn and just say, what would you do? Or the fellow who started up 15 companies, how do you analyze a company? Just call him, man. He'll tell you, and be absolutely shameless to ask for advice. And people will be happy to give you good advice, really.
I'm going to ditto that because that's what I've done, is just really begin to ask questions. I would also say that participating in accelerators is very, very helpful, especially, so my background, healthcare, like if you want somebody intubated, you need a blood gas, ventilator managed, I'm your girl. But understanding the business of life science is pretty complicated, and the accelerator that we participated in was very, very helpful. It was a 12-week program. They literally had something called Pharma U. So I knew quite a bit about the drug discovery process. I didn't understand how in depth and all the steps and costs that happened before we got to human studies. And so a new appreciation. And another accelerator that we did was from NIH. So there's lots and lots of tools. I think MIT has some open source, some classes that you can take if you're trying to understand and become familiar outside of just networking. So there's some formal things you can look at.
I'll just quickly repeat what everybody else has said, even from the beginning. Do what Woody put up on the board at the very beginning. Whatever job you do, make it great. I don't care if they say, put up these chairs, do it great. Do everything you do great. And you will get noticed and you will succeed. I would also say, never hesitate meeting somebody new. As I was talking to John last night, I'm like Lent. All the 17 people that work with Moleculin, I would say 12 had a relationship with somebody else. So be Lent. I would highly encourage you to be, and I wish I'd started being Lent earlier in my career.
The interesting thing, just want to say, the interesting thing about the pharma industry is, if you were running a small convenience store, you can know beginning to end. It's really easy to know beginning to end. There's not one person on this earth that understands the pharmaceutical biotech business from beginning to end. And if they tell you they do, they're lying. Run. So
you mentioned something about women, how they don't get as much funding from investors. Because I know what you that feeling, because I'm disabled in a wheelchair, so
I understand. It's
Yeah.
really an uphill battle. You don't
Yeah.
look like everyone else at the table, and someone asks, who's the CEO here, or could you give me a cup of coffee? And,
Yeah.
and you're going in, and you're like, wow,
or
sorry, what?
or like even worse, it's like, hey, you're a real inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm saying like do people say that to you, like, hey, you're real inspirational, and who's the CEO still? Like,
Yes. Can you give me a cup of coffee, honey?
yeah. So yeah, I just want to, I'd like to talk to you more about that.
So you talked about selling your company for around $1 billion.
Billion.
Million?
Billion.
Yeah, with a
With a
That's what I
B.
thought. So how important is the person that's buying your company? Like, obviously, it's a no-brainer to say yes to $1 billion, but like, do you ever put in thought like who is buying your company?
So it's funny. Yes, this goes back to our naivete and our egos, which are massive. Trust me. So we actually declined it at first with this idea that we would go public because we felt like we were building this thing. We have this amazing technology, and we had other suitors as well, not just these guys. So we had multiple suitors. We go to the JP Morgan event in San Francisco, and we started to draw quite a crowd. But we want to be selective because we had two things that we deemed precious: the technology and the team and the people we built. And even as I say that, I know you guys back there are like, oh, these are serious words. I'm telling you right now. And so the partner we eventually chose, would take good care of the technology and spread around the world. They have 140 locations around the world. We were in 14 countries. So that means we get our technology that we truly believe helps patients and helps people. That's very attractive. And number two, they basically did a buy and a hold. So they weren't going to buy us. You hear so many of these companies, the strategics, they'll buy you, then they rip across, they say, we're not going to change anything. 2 months later, they're ripping apart the sales team. And they've done everything they said they were going to do, and they've not done anything that they said they weren't going to do. And they were serious about it. And we put that in the agreements. So we preserved the team, and we've proven to them why, because we're growing at 35% per year. So those are very important two elements to us.
So I can tell you that when we start looking to help people do their company, I could do a full day seminar on partner selection and the selection criteria. The analogy that I like to use, as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking, choose me, pick me. Well, it's different, right? Because you've created this thing, right? And I look at the technology, and it's your baby, right? So if you think about the technology and the work that you've done and the work that the team's poured in, now you have a decision to make. The decision that you need to make is, what daycare do I want to put my baby in so that my child can flourish? And that kind of changes the equation. Somebody comes in and offers you a deal and says, listen, we're going to give you $1 billion and a 25% royalty. That sounds fantastic. Oh, we only have 2 sales reps in the state of North Carolina, versus somebody coming in and saying, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to risk share with you. We're going to give you a huge piece of this. By the way, we operate in 140 countries, and we're going to make sure that the patients who need this drug get this drug. And that's, back again, always go back to the patient, which is the customer, but the patient.